Strassman. Well, Rick was born and raised in Los Angeles, California. He graduated from U.S. Grant High School in Van Nuys in 1969. Began his undergraduate studies in zoology at Pomona College in Claremont, and later transferred to Stanford University, where he graduated with departmental honors in biological sciences in 1973. He received his MD from the Albert Einstein College of Medicine at Yeshiva University, did his general psychiatry residency at UC Davis in Sacramento, and took a clinical psychopharmacology research fellowship at UC San Diego. In the course of a 2-year post-fellowship position at the University of New Mexico, he discovered the first known function of melatonin in humans. Strassman's studies of DMT and psilocybin in the early 1990s at the University of New Mexico was the first new American clinical research with a Schedule I psychedelic drug in a generation. He is the author of the best-selling book, DMT, The Spirit Molecule, and co-producer of the successful independent documentary with the same name. He is author of DMT and the Soul of Prophecy, co-author of Inner Paths to Outer Space, and author of a work of fiction, Joseph Levy Escapes Death. He has co-authored or authored nearly 500 peer-reviewed scientific papers, served as a consultant to government, academic, and commercial entities, and served as a peer reviewer and managing editor for over a dozen scientific journals. Rick now divides his time between writing, consulting, correspondence, interviews, and mentoring students at all stages of training. Rick and I met Gino on the same evening in Taos, New Mexico about 20 years ago. And the three of us hit it off and have been friends ever since. She came out to do, helped him out with a nonprofit studying DMT called the Cottonwood Institute, Rick had founded. And so I'm very happy to introduce our dear friend and one of my more respectable buddies in the field of psychedelic research, Dr. Rick Strassman.
Thanks, Mark, and thanks, Gina, for putting this together.
Can you hear us now?
Yeah, I can hear you guys now.
Rick, hi, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. I'm settling into my new gigs.
It's wonderful to have you here with us today. I am a little sad that you're not here to be with us in person, but thank you so much for taking the time to join us. It's an honor to have you at Alaska's first psychedelic conference. All right, so we're just going to jump right in since we started off with some technical difficulties here. So Rick, you really are a key figure in the revival of psychedelic research in the United States. You're known for your pioneering study at UNM on DMT in the late 1990s, which explored the effect of DMT. Your research has really sparked a renewed interest in the potential role of psychedelics in science and spirituality. So our first question for you is, what initially drew you to study DMT and what inspired you to embark on this research?
Well, in college, I both learned to meditate and studied some Buddhism, and I also took a lot of psychedelic drugs, and they seemed to share some features. And I thought there must be some common biology that's behind the effects of both of those states, which led me to the pineal gland and then to melatonin, which was the first thing I studied in my research career, and then on to DMT. So I thought that I thought there must be a biological basis of spiritual experience, and that seeing what happens in the brain during psychedelic and meditative and other non-drug states would be a good thing to compare and to study. And I was just driven. I mean, that's it was an idea that I just kind of ran with for, I don't know, about 18 years or so, until I could finally do it.
Okay, thank you. And just out of curiosity, what were some of the most surprising or unexpected results from your DMT studies? And in your opinion, what is the most significant development in DMT research so far?
Well, even though I had used DMT before, and I knew people that had used it, I was not expecting the full range of the accounts of the experiences. They were very strange, and one of the strangest was the encounter of the volunteers' minds with these beings, these freestanding, sentient, powerful things in the DMT world, which in and of itself is made of light and figures in light, rapidly morphing and buzzing. So that was like, even though I knew about the beings, I was still surprised at how frequently they appeared. One thing I was hoping to find, which I did not find, which I think was as important as finding something, is that the drug itself was not spiritual in its nature. The people who had spiritual types of experiences were spiritual people. There were psychological issues. There were some beautiful times and some bad times, but the only full-blown, I guess what you call a mystical experience in our volunteers was in someone with a long-standing interest in the mystical state of oneness. So I concluded that the drugs were not necessarily entheogenic, but were psychedelic. They were disclosing what was in the person's mind at the time of taking the drug.
Yeah, so we had a question along those lines. What do you think about the role of set and setting versus maybe what was a more clinical setting for your studies? And do people have to have some sort of long-standing spiritual tradition or preparation to have a spiritual experience?
Well, our studies took place in a room on a research ward at the University of New Mexico Hospital, and the setting was quite austere and quite clinical. And at first, I thought it would bother the volunteers, but in a way, it had a paradoxical effect. Volunteers felt, number one, that they were completely, completely passive. Once they walked through the door, they didn't have much to say about things. You hooked them up to a number of meters and gauges and drew blood and things. So that, I think, in a way, encouraged people to let go, because they began to let go even before getting the drug. And the other thing is they felt safe being in the hospital. They knew they would feel as if they were out of their bodies, but to not worry about actually having died. So it was comforting in some way. And for the DMT work, in which the altered state is only 20 or 30 minutes, that kind of a setting was unpleasant for the longer acting drug we studied, psilocybin. And about, does one need to have a spiritual practice within a religious entity to have a spiritual experience? No, I don't think so. I think it's more what you occupy your mind with. So if you're thinking spiritual thoughts, reading spiritual texts, trying to become a more spiritual person, it's that set of ideas, concepts, feelings in your mind, which then interact with the drug and are clarified, made more meaningful.
So do you think there's some distinction between DMT or the way that you administered it from, say, psilocybin or ayahuasca in terms of inducing a spiritual or mystical experience?
Well, it depends on what you define by spiritual or mystical. I think of mystical as kind of being one with it all. No time, no space, no sense of self. As opposed to the other side of the spectrum, which I would call interactive relational, in which, in case your personality is maintained, the world that you're visiting or inhabiting is full of content with which you interact. So I think different states are useful for learning different things or amplifying different parts of your mind.
Yeah, because there seems to be this general consensus that these are sacred or spiritual plants or substances, and I know you've expressed sort of a dissenting opinion on this. Can you speak a little more about that? How you would distinguish from, whether an entheogen, I think you at one point you had called the word entheogen cultish. And we've had this discussion before.
I'm no opponent of cults, per se. An entheogen seems to be, first of all, it is freighted, I think, maybe more than cultish. If you look at the meaning of the word "en" within theos, God, and gen, generating. So it assumes a divine world, a spiritual, world, which not everybody may be buying into. It suggests that you can generate from a drug a certain spiritual state, and the within part, the end part, suggests that divinity is within you, as opposed to primarily concentrated on the deity. So it assumes a lot, and it might necessarily exclude from at least the healthcare model people who might otherwise benefit from a psychedelic experience. Look at how Charles Manson used LSD, to kind of recruit and solidify the thought processes of soon-to-be serial killers. So I think it has to do with the set and the setting, which then, with a psychedelic or mind manifesting, mind disclosing, then sheds light, makes more true and meaningful the things that you're already nurturing.
Thank you.
All right, so pivoting from that, what role do you think DMT and other psychedelics should play in modern medicine and therapy? And how do you envision the role of psychedelics in the broader context of mental health and wellness industries in the coming years? As you know, we're in the midst of the psychedelic renaissance and a lot is happening. So we'd be interested in hearing your perspective.
A Zen monastery that I studied at, we had talked about psychedelics and their role in Buddhist practice, specifically, but spirituality in general. We ended up parting over that distinction, or that point of intersection. And one of the the reasons for distancing themselves from a view like that was because they felt that within medicine, that psychedelics were worth taking, giving, but within spirituality they weren't. And that only a worst case scenario do you turn to psychedelics for pain or depression or substance abuse. So I think within the medical sphere, they'll be used for the psychological problems, and I think ultimately to enhance the benefit of biological conditions, such as autoimmune disease, inflammatory disease, things like asthma and rheumatoid arthritis, those the kinds of conditions, because I think that one of the ways that psychedelics work is through enhancement of the placebo response, and those are conditions which have a fairly high response rates to placebo as well. So you'd be boosting the placebo effect and placebo responsive medical conditions. And obviously, it might not be that obvious, but a lot of psychotherapy studies, psychopharmacology studies, antidepressants and whatnot, the placebo response is profound, like 40% as compared to the drug state, which is 60%. So I think psychedelics will see a place in the treatment of psychological conditions. It's the spirituality conditions or interests or intentions, and the wellness model as well. The wellness model is I suppose in between the spirituality and the medical model. So when you're going beyond medical models, my Zen community would say it's not cool, but these things are developed, and we need to think about what they're doing and the risks and the harms and the benefits.
So I was wondering if you might sort of compare what happened to psychedelic research in the 60s, with the counterculture movement and sort of the Timothy Leary being blamed for the complete shutdown of psychedelic research versus what's sort of seeming to go on today. And you had criticized the contemporary psychedelic renaissance, or so-called psychedelic renaissance, as practicing a type of psychedelic messianism. I'm wondering if you can discuss that and elaborate a little bit.
Yeah, well, the Messianic age, at least according to the Hebrew Bible, will be an era of world peace and harmony. No war. You'll beat your swords into plowshares. Every man will sit comfortably, safely under his fig tree. Yeah, so the Messianic era is really great. I mean, everything is as it should be on earth. That's at least the Jewish model of the Messiah. And I think in the 60s, and I think comparably with at least the initial movers within the renewal of interest in psychedelics, there was then and is now a feeling that the more people trip, the better. That the more people have a psychedelic experience, whatever that is, the world will be that much closer to a messianic era of complete worldwide harmony and love. So I think both both that period and this period at least were initiated or came down. Well, in the 60s they came down. Those ideas brought the end of in medical research anyway into psychedelics, the messianism, and how it influenced the research. One of my mentors used to describe how one of the problems within the scientific community back then was researchers getting religion. They were just convinced that what they had discovered, which was if you give a drug, it will cause a certain change in consciousness. If people only have that experience, it'll be that, it's more a case of what will this help as opposed to, what is it doing and how does it help? They stopped asking questions and felt that, that they had that they had an answer, that they wanted to apply, worldwide, basically. And that, in a lot of ways, ended in the scientific research. The government coming down on the drugs themselves, it was also messianic. I mean, Tim was, talking to crowds of 100,000 and telling them to overturn the system. You can't have that kind of stuff going on for very long. So messianism, I think, drove both of those, trains off the tracks. And it could be that we're beginning to see a repeat of that process with the recent backlash and digging in the heels of the establishment against psychedelic research.
So, I think part of what I was hearing you say is that there might be some kind of parallel between, Leary's proselytizing and maybe the, advertising and marketing that's going on now to promote it. They're both being promoted to the largest possible audience as a type of panacea cure.
Well, the major difference this time around is capital. Money. Venture capitalists are circling, big pharma circling, lots of startups, insurance, the VA. I mean, there's just all of this money that's poised to be made, and that was not the case in the 60s. So that's a big difference. I think the attitudes are the same though on both sides of the discussion. But the money corrupts, and the more money corrupts more. So you've got these pharma bros who just aren't doing good science. I hate to say it, in order to just get it to the market as fast as possible. That, and I don't think they're as concerned with the messianic, with the messianic era as they are about making tens of millions of dollars. So that's the difference, I think, this time around too.
All right, thank you for that. What message would you like to convey to those who are interested in studying psychedelics or who are skeptical of their benefits?
The key is education. That's key to making your own decisions, in an adult, mature way. So the more you know, the more you're able to discern what's the right way to go or not, and to be able to adjust on your feet if need be. So education, read books about psychedelics. A couple of years ago, I published a little handbook, the Psychedelic Handbook, which is, kind of a brief description of all the drugs, what they do, what they don't do, how they work. I think it's good to be skeptical of, their benefits, but I think it's good to be skeptical in general. You don't want to just, you believe everything that you hear. There's no question that psychedelics can do a lot of good in the right hands, and that still is being worked out. It's also true that they can be very dangerous. There could be adverse effects and flashbacks and depression, psychosis, all kinds of things, which can occur in an unprepared, unstable person who shouldn't be taking drugs. So I don't think it's black or white. There are benefits, or potential benefits, and there are potential harms.
So we know that you have a new book coming out soon, which I have not read. And I know it's sort of a follow-up to the Joseph Levy book, which I just loved. I was wondering more if you could talk about what this new book, Altered States, represents and how it compares to Joseph Levy, and tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, you're referring to my autobiographical novel, Joseph Levy Escapes Death. Yeah. And Eugenia played a very important role in that story. Yeah. She spent a week or two.
Yeah. Don't worry.
I didn't give you permission.
Oh, sorry.
It's a pseudonym. You have to figure out. I'm in there too,
right.
So.
Right. Yeah. Well, that book from 2019 is, an account of a year of bad health and bad health care and some bad relationships. And I just exaggerate all the bad and forget about anything neutral or good. It's like one snarky dark corner of my personality. So either you love the book or you hate the book. It's pretty extreme. But I still think it's pretty funny. Whenever I open it up, I laugh. So it is holding up. My new book comes out in December. It's called My Altered States. If I can screen share, I can show your audience the cover.
Maybe. Thank you.
If you can't, that's okay.
Yeah.
You don't need to.
What's the subtitle?
It's a long subtitle.
That's my
Here. Here I've got the cover up. Can I share screen with you?
They're thinking about it.
Okay, let me know. So the book is called My Altered States, a doctor's extraordinary account of trauma, psychedelics, and spiritual growth. Yeah, I should learn that subtitle. It's pretty long. It's a memoir of my own altered states. There's a lot of chapters on psychedelics in there. There's 3 or 4 chapters on alcohol, a couple on cannabis, a couple on my depression, a couple on my hypomania. Some childhood abuse memories and narratives. It's illustrated. Mary Lee Chalice, a friend in Birmingham, Alabama. She did the cover for the Joseph Levy book, and there's about 33, I think, drawings of hers, which really amplify, clarify the themes of the chapters. Meditation states, it's around, I think, 29, 30 chapters. I just narrated it at a studio in Santa Fe. So there may be an audible version of it with me narrating it. It's like Joseph Levy, but a lot more expansive. It's a clinical description, and then each of the chapters has got an explanatory section at the end, which details how the state came about, why, and I think most important, what they mean, how you integrate those kinds of experiences.
So it's definitely nonfiction, autobiographical versus Levy, which was a sort of semi-fictionalized, personal story. A very New Mexico story, I have to add, about your experience.
Yeah, it couldn't have happened anywhere else. Yeah. So this new book, My Altered States, it partakes of that, clear description of events, thoughts, and feelings. But it's, from, my full personality, rather than, my evil double.
Just really quickly, Rick, so Mark wanted me to scratch this question, but I think that now you're very open. Very open to sharing about your experiences. Just out of curiosity, what was your most memorable experience working with DMT or any other psychedelic? Maybe not memorable per se, but most profound. We're really interested in.
Yeah. Well, the first one that comes to mind is kind of bad. What was the most impressive experience at Betty's? Boy, it's really hard to pin one down. A lot of people had huge experiences. They became DNA. One guy lost his faith in God. One person, started believing in God. So, the beings were pretty interesting. You wouldn't expect that kind of thing from just taking a drug, but for example, one guy, saw some reptiles, big 9-foot reptiles, and they opened their chest up, and in their chest was the process of reproduction. And he was just aghast. He was just astonished. So those kind of experiences were pretty common. So just the fact that a drug, given within a minute will put people in this completely different world. And that's one of the things that I find most fascinating about endogenous DMT, which is made in the mammalian brain.
So we don't have too much time left, but I think Gina did ask about the most significant development in DMT research as far as scientific progress, I suppose. And you had also mentioned the placebo effect, and elsewhere you had called it a super placebo, and wondering if you could mention these studies about the production of endogenous DMT, and where what do you think are the greatest promises, and do it all in 3 minutes.
Well, I could just briefly overview the DMT studies which are occurring. It's surprisingly few. I mean, you'd think, even if it weren't an endogenous compound, studying a drug that could change your consciousness so profoundly, I think it deserves a lot more study than it has received. And especially, now that we know it's made in high concentrations and in the mammalian brain. There's one avenue which has developed is to set up a means of continuously infusing DMT into people over the space of an hour, 30 minutes, 90 minutes, in order to keep people in that state, so you can characterize it better. Because it's quite hard to get your bearings when you're given an IV injection or smoking it. It comes on so quickly, it's over so fast. So there are two groups that have developed a means of doing that. One in Switzerland and one in London. And there's a group at UC San Diego. John Dean is about to get started with one as well. DMT is a neuroplastogen, and other psychedelics are too, but DMT is as well, which means it stimulates the production of neurons, new neurons from stem cells, and also increases the connections among existing nerve cells. So the obvious question is, well, could this be helpful for stroke or for TBI? And there is one study that I know of where it's being used in the context of, in the future, giving it to patients with stroke to speed their recovery. I'm consulting with that group. It's called Algernon Pharma in Canada, and I think they're working at a 6-hour infusion, and seeing about the safety parameters. And if that works out in normal volunteers, the thought is to use it in stroke patients. There is a small amount of interest using DMT as an antidepressant, the same way that psilocybin has. 5-methoxy-DMT too. And there is ayahuasca research, and in some ways ayahuasca research is DMT research. Not entirely, but to a large extent, it seems. The ayahuasca research mostly is taking place in South America, where it's being used within a research setting for depression, anxiety. It's also being studied quite carefully, though, in terms of its impact on people's behavior after joining ayahuasca using churches. Are they healthier? Are they happier? Are they smarter? Those kinds of things. So that, I think, in some ways, is DMT research.
Great. Well, thank you, Rick. I think we don't have much time for questions, but we do have time for a few.
Any questions?
We can relay them to Rick if anybody has a question.
Hi, since Rick was just speaking about DMT, IV DMT infusion, I'm wondering if he's familiar with or can comment on DMT base and the ability to sort of sit or titrate into a state with that form of administration.
What in extended sessions or what do you think about using the DMT vapes for extended sessions and modulating?
Well, that's great.
That is a thing now, right?
Right. I think it's good. Everybody should do it. Just kidding. LOL. Yeah. I mean, if it could be done, if you can think of it, if people are going to do it. User beware, educate yourself. It was interesting. A few years back, I was at an event in Austin, or Dallas, and Spangle was playing their Simon Prosper, and there was more smell of DMT coming from the dance floor than marijuana. So I'm sure some folks were, kind of getting into the DMT pipes. It is kind of risky. I mean, if you're confident in, who you would be getting it from, the pedigree chemically. But still, psychedelics they're very serious drugs. If you take a high enough dose, they just kind of, they're just kind of shocking. So you do want to know what you're getting into. The setting, the preparation, and the environment.
I think we maybe have one more short question Q&A, if anyone's interested. Any questions for Rick? Why not? This guy back here, the IT man.
The IT man.
His name is Josiah.
There you go.
The smartest guy in the room.
What's the interaction of DMT with other psychopharmacological compounds?
Yeah, what kind of psychopharmacology?
Stimulants, SSRIs, prescription.
So how does DMT work with SSRIs and other prescription drugs? Which ones, where are the cautionary notes there?
Yeah, that information is changing all the time. I can't really say one way or the other.
But which kind of psychedelics does it seem to go well with?
You mean DMT?
Yeah, just admixture compounds, aside from ayahuasca.
Well, I'm still kind of like a nerd. Like I just look into DMT itself, and the science which is being generated around it. There's a lot of research coming out, and I keep up with it. I'm finding that the majority of the papers have got to do with reviewing other people's research. I'd say at least half of these papers are reviews, scoping reviews, real life reviews. It's amazing the number of different types of reviews there are. So it's a fairly steady output. What I focus on are the journals and the fields that are biological and psychological. That's just the way I was trained and what I'm interested in.
Well, thanks a lot, Rick. Let's give Rick a hand. Website is rickstrassman.com. I know you.
Yeah, sorry I couldn't be up there this time around.
Next year, right?
If you're gonna have another one, let me know.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks, guys. Yeah.